Welcome back, book nerds. On today's episode of the podcast, I'll be speaking with Milena Govich and Arvind Ethan David, the masterminds behind Grey. Grey is a radical rework of the classic Oscar Wilde novel, a supernatural revenge thriller about a beautiful, dangerous woman, Dorian Gray, and her mission of retribution. Written by best-selling author Arvind Ethan David, Grey is told both as a graphic novel and as a full audio drama directed by Milena. Let's learn more about this project now on the podcast. All right, book nerds, I'm now speaking with Milena Govich, the director, and Arvind Ethan David, the writer of the audio drama and graphic novel Grey. Thank you both so much for taking the time to talk with us here at JeanBookNerd. We really appreciate it.
Glad to be here.
So let's start off. Please, would you, even though I just said your names, would you please introduce yourselves and your role in the project, and just tell us a little bit about the project?
Ladies first.
All right. Hi, Milena Govich. I am the director of Grey. I'm also acting in the audio drama as Mrs. Chevening. And Arvind and I have been dear friends for many, many years and have been looking for opportunities to work together. And he presented this idea to me and I could not say no.
I mean, you could, but then you would have to stop being friends. So that would be
Peer pressure.
Yes, and I'm Arvind, and I'm the writer of Grey, and it was an idea that has been sort of in the back of my brain for a very long time. Oscar Wilde is my sort of original hero as a writer, and suddenly about 2 years ago it clicked together, and I was like, oh, that's what I want to do with it. And 2 years later, here we are.
Nice. So could you tell us a little bit about the story and the background?
Sure. In the original, so for those who don't know, it's inspired by the Oscar Wilde novel, The Picture of Dorian Gray, which is one of the sort of great Gothic horror novels. It sort of stands alongside Dracula and Frankenstein and Jekyll and Hyde as one of the great original Gothic horror novels. And in that story, it's the story of the most beautiful man of his age, Dorian Gray, who magically becomes immortal and develops a sort of power of being able to go through life without consequences, without ever being made responsible for anything he does, and of the painting in his attic that slowly rots and degrades with his, even as he stays youthful and beautiful, as he lives a long and sinful and cruel life. And that's the original. And it's sort of it's a fable of morality. It's a fable of so many things. Nothing Oscar Wilde did was straightforward, but amongst other things, it's about hypocrisy. It's about the rules that society sets for us and who gets to break them and who doesn't get to break those rules. And it struck me, and I've always loved it. It's a sort of a dangerous work. It's so dangerous. It was banned, or it didn't get published in uncensored form till nearly 50 years after Wilde's death in the 1950s. And one of the reasons it's dangerous is it plays a lot with the idea of sexual power and sexual identity. Dorian is bisexual in the book. He has a homosexual relationship with Lord Henry Wotton, and he's also a sexual predator who rapes and seduces and murders and molests his way through a long life and through 200 pages. And it sort of struck me that we are once again in a moment where those themes of sexual power and predation, of hypocrisy and vengeance are very at the forefront of all our minds for lots of very good reasons. And it just struck me that maybe Dorian Gray would have something to say about all that.
Nice. I think that's a pretty good overview and summary. Did you have anything else? Did you want to add anything to that, Milena?
Um, well, when Arvind first told me his idea for this adaptation, I thought it was so timely and something that our society needs and will crave. Um, to having the tables turn on characters is really interesting, and to reimagine Dorian Gray as a woman at the center of the story, taking back power, fighting the double standards that she's endured all of her life, and frankly seeking the justice that she was denied her whole life is a very compelling central character. So, as a woman, I responded really quickly and very strongly to the material, and so it's been my honor to really be on this ride in Arvind's vision.
So I'm curious when it comes to this reimagining, and like you said, kind of turning the tables and flipping it on its side, or upside down rather. I mean, how much did you want to keep from the original, and how did you decide what was going to stay kind of more like the same theme, obviously, but what you wanted to change versus what you wanted to keep, and how far you could change it without it becoming, too far from the original storyline? How do you walk that line?
I've spent a lot of my career being very lucky that I've spent it adapting and building on the characters and stories and mythologies of a lot of my greatest heroes, whether it's Douglas Adams or Neil Gaiman, working with Alanis Morissette on Jagged Little Pill. I've sort of spent a lot of my life adapting giant landmark work, and whether it's as a writer or as a producer. And the thing that I have learned is that you don't try and adapt a work of genius. You don't take a work of genius and try just to do it again. That is almost definitely a recipe for failing spectacularly. So it's one of the reasons why I had no interest in rewriting Gray as a novel, because it's already a brilliant novel written by one of the greatest masters of the English language who has ever lived. So instead, I think what we're doing is taking the themes, taking the tone, and taking the characters and putting them into the modern world. Our Gray takes place right this minute. It takes place in the 2020s. It takes place mainly, but not exclusively, in New York. And it takes the ideas of the original, but it puts them entirely in a new context. And I think as long as we're true to sort of Wilde's questioning revolutionary spirit and his willing to subvert everything and to go anywhere, as long as we are true to that, and as long as we always do it with wit and lightness and with both a sharp knife and a kind smile, I think anything's allowed.
Yeah, I think, Arvind hit the nail on the head there. He and I both have strong and deep theater backgrounds. And one thing that's very popular, especially in the Broadway world, is revivals, right? Remounting, restaging productions of the past, even only productions that were 10 years ago, sometimes get remounted. My first Broadway show as an actor has already been revived. And I'm not that old. But the question always becomes why? Why that piece? Why now? And what is your point of view as an artist that you're bringing to it that ideally elevates the material? And Arvind's take on this checks all those boxes. He's taking the best parts and the best themes from the original and spinning them in a way that feels fresh and relevant and new. And that's always what you're looking for in an adaptation.
So if I remember reading correctly, this is both going to be an audio drama and a graphic novel, correct?
Yes.
So I'm curious, with those being very different mediums, are they independent from each other, or do they kind of like weave in and out? Like, can you listen or read and get the full story, or is it kind of like, do you need to listen and read them together? How does that work?
You're right. They could not be more opposite mediums.
No, they are literally
Purely
the most opposite mediums.
Yeah.
And that was part of the fun. That was part of the fun. And also, crucially, neither of them is a prose novel. That's already there. To answer your question, they absolutely stand alone and will be a satisfying experience if you just do one or the other. But if you do both, we hope that you'll have the deepest, fullest experience. And you certainly won't feel like you're duplicating, because they tell the same story, but they tell it very differently. So the graphic novel is told from a sort of omniscient point of view. You are experiencing the events as they happen, the crime and the mystery as it unfolds, and it's very much a sort of cat and mouse game between our Dorian, who in our version is a woman and is a criminal bent on this mission of vengeance against a cabal of powerful men who have wronged her, and the detective, Henry Wooten, who is assigned to bring her to justice, but who ultimately becomes sort of enraptured in both her cause and her, and their sort of game of cat and mouse, their love story, and their antagonism sort of drives you through what ultimately is a tragedy. It's beautifully drawn by Eugenia Kamaki, Diana Greenay, and Joanna Lafuente, who I've been working with for 2 years on it. It's beautiful, every page of it, and it tells the story pretty visually.
It's stunning to look at.
And the audio drama, of course, you can't look at it all, but, and would be advised not to, but also takes place from a very different perspective. It's in the form of a true crime podcast that is being recorded after all the events in the graphic novel. In fact, 20 years after. And it's being narrated by a character who's not in the books at all, a mysterious journalist called Speranza, who is investigating this crime that took place 20 years in her past and which has never been fully solved. She wants to know the truth behind who Dorian Gray was and her terrible act of terrorism which changed the world. And Speranza has mysteries of her own, and you discover those as you get deeper into the story.
And it's really interesting to go from one to the other. I think you could consume them in either order. You could read the graphic novel first and then listen to the podcast or the audio drama, or vice versa, because you'll find illuminating moments in each of them. It's very interesting to revisit, like if you read the graphic novel first and then you went to the audio drama, you get to revisit characters that you spent time with and see how they feel and what their perception of the events were 20 years before. I don't know of any other storytelling devices that really give you that in these two different mediums with two different perspectives, not only in the genre, but in the points of view of the characters.
And Milena, if I remember correctly, you're the director, correct?
Yes.
Did you both direct the audio drama and the graphic novel, or was it just one or the other?
Well, I will be directing the audio drama, and we are in process of putting that together right now. So it's not completed yet. But as far as the graphic novel, no, that is all Arvind. That is his brilliance on that page.
Well, me and a bunch of wonderful artists, although I love the idea suddenly of a director of a graphic novel. I love the idea that Milena would turn up and tell the drawings where to stand. How to hold their heads.
Well, you could say, like, I want the characters come from this side of the page. This needs to be bigger, more blood, like that kind of stuff. Like,
well,
the art director.
Yeah, there are animation directors.
Oh, absolutely.
But it's the process of the graphic novel is a little different. So yeah.
How do you take the kind of the story and what people are going to see and translate that accurately into an audio form? How does that work? Because obviously, you visually see an image and there's a lot of information in just that image. But then if you had to try to like tell the story, through words, through audio of that picture, that's a whole nother beast.
Sure. Well, that's the thing we're not doing. So there is no one-to-one correlation between the graphic novel and the audio drama. It's not like, this is page 1 or chapter 1. They're different structures. It's a whole different style of storytelling. And that was the fun of it. And I think one thing that's happened in the last few years is that the audio book has sort of outgrown its old skin. The old days, what you're describing is exactly right. Like an audio book was literally page 1, chapter 1. You can, it was like, mama and daddy reading you a story.
Yeah.
You could follow along.
I'm just, sorry, go ahead.
And for a certain type of book, that's still wonderful. Again, for a prose novel, that's still wonderful. But there's been a sort of revolution in audiobooks that we're hopefully going to be part of, which is, to take a recent example, Malcolm Gladwell's latest book, Talking to Strangers. The audiobook is not him reading the book. It feels like a podcast. You're listening to interviews with the experts, with the characters in the book. They are, studies. They're, it's a dynamic medium, and I think that's the fun of it. And what we're making here is a full cast, fully scored, sound designed audio experience that should feel like you're in a real true crime cold case podcast with scenes being recreated and police recordings and archival material and news clips. You'll be experiencing it the way we all experience podcasts, which is straight into our brains from our ears, and we conjure up our own pictures in our own world from the sounds and words that we are being given.
And, as far as, I think what you were kind of getting at as far as the translation, we will lean heavily into the sound design. There's lots of clues in the podcast narration from Speranza, who's the investigator. So it'll be visually very fulfilling to listen to, if that makes sense.
Yes, exactly.
Everything we will paint a picture for you, but it's also fully sound designed. It's cast with terrific actors. We have some amazing people that are going to be recording the character voices. And my hope, and I think Arvind's as well, is that you'll be completely immersed in this world as you listen. Just as if you sit down with a graphic novel and to read at the beginning, and you can get so drawn in visually, this is going to draw you in equally on the audio scale.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's really kind of what I was really curious about, is like, as I was saying, when you visually see something, you get so much information, and then trying to translate, instead of doing it through a visual medium, you're doing it through an audio. So how do you still convey all that information? And I mean, when you're directing this group of people who are going to be telling the story, like, do you already have, obviously you have I'm assuming you have a script already written out for them to read, but I mean, I've seen videos of behind the scenes of people doing voiceovers and doing audio dialogue and stuff for animated films, like you said. Do you is the process still the same? Do you actually like act out the scenes in a room and have the recordings, or is it more just like a round table reading sort of thing?
No, it'll be very similar to what you've seen of behind the scenes of actors recording for animation. It's just that instead of the voices being married to a picture, the voices are going to be produced into the audio product. So yes, each of them will go into a sound booth. We'll have a script. I will be there. I will be shaping the performance. I'll be giving them ideas that inspire them to portray certain elements of the characters. So it's very much like directing any sort of acting. It's just that the final product will only be audio instead of the visual as well.
That's awesome. Can both of you go into kind of like what the process was for finding the cast for the audio portion? I'm curious, like, did you already go in having someone like, oh, we need someone with this voice who can deliver the lines like this, or was it just like, let's just see who can deliver the lines and see what we come up with and like as we go? How did that work?
A lot of them are, well, we should say, we've cast, I think, the 5 of the leads, but there are many more roles to be cast, and the lead narrator, Speranza, is not yet cast. We're in that process now. But our wonderful cast, Lauren Patton as Dorian Gray, Samuel Barnett as the villainous Baron Arnheim, and Neil Brown Jr. as Henry Wootan, and Richard Schiff as Lady Bracknell, as Detective Lady Bracknell, and Kiran Deol as Gwendolyn are all people we've worked with before between us, and in particular, Richard Schiff, Neil Brown Jr., and Sam Barnett and I made Dirk Gently together, and Dirk Gently is a show that was very dear to all our hearts, and we became very close friends making it, and we've all wanted a reason to, have a little reunion. And these parts are sort of perfect for them. It wasn't, in some cases were written for them. In the case of several of them, I had their voices in my head, possibly before I had asked them to do it. But
always dicey to do that.
Always a risk. But then, I play the, as Milena said, when you've been friends for a long time, you don't say no. So
yeah.
Hey, I got a project. I'm in.
Yeah, and all of these people have such an incredible track record. It's not that we would need them to audition or anything like that. They are phenomenal, well-honed actors who can basically do whatever you need them to do. And they all have a great understanding of the tone that we're going for. And so when we do sit down to put it all together and record everything, it's my intention to, as I said before, to inspire them, to bring their ideas to the table as well, and to really capitalize on the creativity and the talent of all these amazing people that we've brought together in the execution.
So in the scope of on the audio side, how many characters and voices are you going to have?
Oh my gosh, I haven't even counted.
I mean, dozens, if not hundreds of characters, but we won't necessarily have the joy about good actors is they can do more than one voice.
Yes, because you're not looking at them. If they can change their voice and do a little bit different.
Exactly.
Yeah. We're going to get some good bang for our buck from some of these people.
I'm always just very curious whenever, whenever there's an audiobook or a podcast or anything, and there's multiple characters. Yeah, like you said, a lot of times you have just a handful of actors, and they do all the different voices, and they change their voice. But I'm always curious as to how many characters, like, in total in a universe, in an audio universe, there are.
I mean, look, we're still writing the audio drama. There's only about 8 lead characters, but because of its format, it's a true crime podcast. There's news clippings, there's archival clippings, there's documentary, there is commentary, there's little interviews with bit players. So it does all build up. But as I said, the leads are the people we've talked about, and the as yet uncast Speranza. But if you want to think about how an actor can play multiple roles, think about Winnie the Pooh. the voice of Winnie the Pooh, for as long as any of us can remember it or think of it, is a wonderful actor called Jim Cummings, who also plays Tigger.
I didn't know that.
Mind?
That's
Jim Cummings
great.
plays both Winnie the Pooh and Tigger, often in the same scene, talking to each other. And generations of children and adults have never realized this.
Very true. Very true. So, I mean, this whole thing between the audio side and the graphic novel is just sounds like just a huge process and a huge undertaking. How long has this been in development for? And I'm also curious to know, kind of along the way, did the project have to change? Did the scope change? What were some of the memorable times and moments? And obviously it's not all done yet, but I'm just curious to know about the overall process of making this whole thing come together.
I've been writing it and the artists have been drawing it for about 2 years now. I think I sold the idea to my publishers in February 2 years ago. So we're just a little over 2 years now. And it's remained pretty true to its original conception as a graphic novel, except that we're releasing it in 2 volumes. When I think when we originally conceived it, we thought it would just be 1 volume, but it ended up being pretty long and took a long time to write, and even longer to draw. So we're releasing it in 2 volumes. The first volume is in shops in June, and the second volume and the audio drama, the audio drama was an idea that came later. As I said, I was about halfway through. Milena and I are members of a wonderful script group, a group of actors and writers who get together and read each other's work. It's actually how we know each other. It's how we met 10 years ago. And
10 years ago? What?
10 years ago. Shh, don't tell anyone. Don't tell.
Your secret's safe with us.
Thanks.
And we at one point we had the script group read an early draft of this, and actually it's changed a lot since then, because the early draft was much closer to the graphic novel, and that's when I realized, oh no, the really interesting thing to do here is to reinvent it. And so that's when we really reinvented it to be this true crime podcast, which is what it's become. But in terms of what happens next, it's all to play for at the moment. We are currently talking to you on day 2 of our Kickstarter, which is being run right now to pre-sell and raise the funds for the audio drama and for the second volume. As of this minute, we are 60% to our goal.
Yay!
Nice.
And hopefully, with the help of your listeners, we'll get all the way there very soon.
Absolutely. What should if our listeners want to go to that Kickstarter, what should they search for?
Gray, Gray, Gray graphic novel and audio drama, or just go to sistersofgray.com, and that will take you straight to the Kickstarter. sistersofgray.com.
Perfect. So what have you run into any have there been so far like any really memorable moments in the process of making this this project come to life? Did you run into any big problems? Did you have anything really funny that's occurred? Any like crazy ideas that you're like, ooh, that's genius?
I'm not sure. We're still very much in process. So a lot of that stuff comes later as you're closer to the finish line.
There was a moment when we were making the Kickstarter video, and I had sent Milena a script, and then she sent me her recording the script. And Milena, I should say, it's just been filming 2 episodes of television at the same time, or something ridiculous.
It was bananas.
And I haven't told you this, but I got your tapes. You're like doing the lines for the Kickstarter video, and suddenly you hit a bit where I just went, oh, make something up and improvise.
Yeah.
And you were so not expecting the script.
I was like, okay. I just had like 10 minutes on a lunch break. I was in a trailer on set on location outside of New York, and I was like, I gotta get this to Arvind today. I've got to do it. Yes, and I tripped up and fell and stumbled all over myself, but fortunately, thanks to the modern technology of editing, no one will ever know, except for Arvind.
No. And also, like, it is also the only time that any script of mine will ever say, make something up and improvise. I don't mind. Those are not lines that my actors usually get to read.
Maybe that could be some bonus material for the Kickstarter backers or something.
The Kickstarter video outtakes.
Oh, believe me. I mean, I do these podcasts, but there's a lot of bloopers that get edited out, and things that some of our listeners will never hear, which is probably for the best, because it's just me being tongue-tied and not being able to pronounce things half the time.
Sure.
But awesome. No, that all sounds so much fun. And I mean, it's always really cool taking a classic, and like you were saying, Arvind, such a well-known story and kind of reimagining it in like a modern age and doing kind of like a retelling of it. Are there any other novels that you could see, doing this for in the future?
There's some I can't talk about.
Don't tell your secrets, Arvind.
Yeah, no, there's a couple.
Or do JeanBookNerd spoilers, right? Exclusives.
I will say that I'm currently working on 2 other of my heroes, and I can't talk about either of them yet, but they are books and authors who I have also loved for almost as long as I've loved Oscar, and I am deep into the one and just starting the other, and they're both very exciting. But no, I cannot say. Sorry.
Dang it. Well, I tried, listeners. I'm sorry. I tried to be as persuasive as I could.
One has a detective, one has aliens. That's as much as I can do.
I mean, those both sound great, and even combining them, detectives and aliens. Yeah. Oh my.
Exactly. Crossover.
Exactly. Hey, it's graphic novels and audio, dramas. Anything is possible, right?
Indeed.
So when do you have an expected potential like delivery day when you're thinking the project hopefully will be finished up? When can our listeners be anticipating to get their hands and ears on these projects?
Where our Kickstarter commitment is to deliver by September, October. I think October is what we're saying on Kickstarter. But Volume 1 you can get before that. Volume 1 is in stores, and if you back us on Kickstarter, we'll get it to you before that in July. And yeah, the plan is to make the audio drama over the summer and get it out in the fall. And Volume 2 will come at about the same time as the audio drama.
Awesome. Sounds very exciting, and definitely something that is definitely down my alley. I'm a big fan of audio dramas, and I love graphic novels, so I'll definitely be checking out the Kickstarter in the near future.
Thank you.
Great.
So, well, thank you for taking the time to talk to us here at JeanBookNerd. Where can our listeners learn more about each of you? And go ahead and if you could give us that Kickstarter website again, just in case.
sistersofgrey.com, or just search for Grey graphic novel on Kickstarter, and that's a pretty good place to find out about us, because our bios and photos and the video of Milena and I talking and improvising is there.
Yes.
Perfect. No, that makes it one website to rule them all. Super easy. One place to go for all your information, book nerds. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. Really appreciate it. I wish you both the best of luck, and I can't wait to see the project when it's all finished and check out both the audio drama and the graphic novel.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know about everyone else, but this project sounds not only fun, but really interesting. I think the fact that it's both a graphic novel and an audio drama makes this really unique, and I'm excited to see what it all looks like and sounds like when it's all released. Be sure to check out the Kickstarter to learn more and back the project if you want. Tune in for another episode of the podcast, but until then, take care. Do either of our guests have any closing words for our listeners before we sign off?
I'm Milena Govich, and I'm the director of Gray, and you're listening to JeanBookNerd.com.
I'm Arvind Ethan David, and I'm the writer and creator of Gray, and you're listening to JeanBookNerd.com.